Welcome to The Story. I'm David Mulco in for Pat Doris. Tonight, an investigation into consumer debt and the lack of protection for people in the state of Oregon. And boy, do we have quite the story to share with you. Before we get to that, here is a snapshot of all the lawsuits filed in Oregon just on Monday. We're going to explain most of these involve people being sued over failing to make payments on things that might include medical bills or credit cards or car payments. It keeps going and going and going. Often, if and when you don't pay, that debt will go to a collector. From there, it can often turn aggressive, even downright ugly. And then there are cases like this one, a woman who is being sued over debt she says she does not owe. In fact, she doesn't even know what it is. Investigative reporter Kyla Boshi takes a look at the novel way she is now fighting back.
Regina Fleming is on top of things.
Yeah.
She has to be, as a wife, a mother,
Yes.
and manager at work.
We are very frugal. We are very careful with our finances. I drive a car with over 300,000 miles on it because I don't want a car payment.
Which may help explain why the
is
West Linn woman was so surprised after learning she'd been sued over consumer debt. In November, a company called LVNV Funding filed a lawsuit against Regina seeking almost $2,000 in unpaid bills along with interest and fees dating back 5 years ago.
So for something to just randomly show up, it is a big red flag. I would know if this was my debt.
Adding to the mystery, the name and address listed on an invoice attached to court papers was clearly outdated.
I haven't lived at this address for several years. I haven't gone by this name for several years.
So instead of just rolling over, Regina decided to fight back
These are just some of the documents that I've created to file.
by filing a stack of responses and motions in court. No attorney would take her case, she said. The dollar amount was too low.
A debt owed in the amount of $2,191.
So she turned to ChatGPT, the artificial intelligence chatbot.
These are all of the questions over here that I've actually asked ChatGPT to help me with. So I would go in and say, I'm looking for information on this, or what is a way that I would say this in a legal document?
Even with the help of ChatGPT, Regina figures she spent more than 100 hours researching and writing her legal defense.
Easy. I, to this day, do not know what this debt is for. I don't know if it was a store credit card. I don't know if it was one transaction, multiple transactions. To this day, no one has even told me what the debt is.
LVNV Funding, the company suing Regina, claims it bought the debt from Synchrony Bank. Old debt is often bought and sold, changing hands several times. Regina says she's never done business with a Synchrony Bank and wonders if this is all a case of mistaken identity or even identity theft.
It's as if you're having to prove that you're innocent.
If you look at their language in this documentation, it's very aggressive. They tell me I should have this stuff, that it is definitely me. And in our court system, you're innocent until proven guilty, not with your debts. You are guilty, and you have to prove your innocence. But how do you prove something didn't happen?
Over the past decade, Oregonians have filed more than 4,000 complaints with the Federal Consumer Financial Protection Bureau over debt collection. Of those complaints, 43% involve creditors attempting to collect debt that wasn't owed.
Do consumers have any recourse?
If they don't owe the debt, so if it's not their debt, under current Oregon law, unfortunately, there is not a clear path.
Chris Coughlin, policy director for the nonprofit Oregon Consumer Justice, admits it's hard for consumers to hold collectors accountable for debts they don't owe.
Generally speaking, what advice might you offer to consumers that would find themselves in a similar position?
Well, the first thing is if you get any paperwork from a court around a debt and there's a court date, show up at the court date and ask questions. Don't ignore it. You have 30 days to respond.
When consumers fail to respond, they lose the case by default. Then a debt collector may be able to garnish wages or take money from your bank account.
Bullies target weak people that don't fight back or can't fight back for themselves.
3 years ago, New Mexico's Attorney General filed a lawsuit against LVNV Funding as part of a nationwide crackdown led by the Federal Trade Commission dubbed Operation Corrupt Collector. LVNV sought to have the case dismissed, and in May, a judge ruled in favor of LVNV, granting summary judgment. Meanwhile, the company continues going after consumers. We looked through court records and found last year, LVNV Funding filed more than 2,600 debt collection lawsuits against Oregon consumers, including Regina Fleming.
It's been hours and hours and just so much anxiety.
With claims of unpaid debt and a lawsuit hanging over her head, Regina has been forced to reassess. Her family had planned to move into a larger home. Instead, they'll stay in their apartment.
So my credit score is tanked. So now our hopes of having a family home are just in a holding pattern right now.
Regina admits she could have figured out a way to pay and the lawsuit would have gone away. But she didn't.
No, I refuse to roll over and just give up on this. Just because it's hard does not mean it's not worth fighting. Until people start standing up and fighting against this stuff, it's going to continue to happen over and over and over again.
And Kyle joins us now. Kyle, I mean, you really have to applaud Regina there standing up on principle. I find it incredible she still has no idea what this debt is actually for. What does a debt collection company say?
Yeah, so we reached out to the company behind this lawsuit, LVNV Funding, and they declined to comment, wouldn't answer our questions.
All right, you mentioned some 2,600 lawsuits filed by this company in Oregon alone last year. So it sounds like Regina's not the only one. There are a lot of other companies out there, too.
Oh, for sure. There are a lot of debt collection companies. And it's an issue that affects a lot of Oregonians. 16% of Oregonians have a debt that's been turned over to collections. And unfortunately, a lot of those, they do end up in a lawsuit. Now, the challenge is, unlike criminal proceedings where low-income defendants are represented by counsel, they're given a lawyer. In these cases, they're not. You're on your own. And that presents a whole host of challenges. Not only navigating the legal system on your own, but even getting to court for some people is challenging.
Right, and the whole thing, Regina talking about having to prove a negative that she is innocent, rather the opposite of how our criminal justice system works. What about consumer protections? How does Oregon measure up here?
Yeah, so a national consumer advocacy group gave Oregon a D as in dog, grade.
One step above F.
Yes, on protecting consumers from debt collection and debt collection lawsuits. So it's not good. Now, the state legislature tried to address this issue. A bill came up last session. Unfortunately, that bill died in committee, didn't go anywhere.
All right, so maybe we will see some change here.
We hope so.
Kyle, appreciate your reporting around this. This evening, we're going to show you a side of Portland's drug crisis you may not have seen before. It is one mother's quest to do anything and everything she can to help save her adult daughter. At the center of homelessness and substance use is a young woman named Jade. Blair Best introduces us to her mother, who has spent 2 months searching the streets, hoping to help her daughter find a way out.
Pax? Jade?
Every day
Pax?
for 8 weeks.
If she doesn't want to be found, she won't respond.
Shannon Starr has searched the streets of Portland for her daughter Jade, known as Pax on the streets.
Have you seen her? I haven't seen her since Wednesday.
Last week, we found her by chance while reporting on a story downtown.
But I've been out here for like 3-4 years almost.
Jade moved from Arizona to Portland with a friend in 2019.
The town that we were living in is more of a smaller community, and they just wanted to kind of spread their wings.
She had her own apartment and was a manager at her job.
It's 13-14 months officially on the streets, but I literally used to live behind this building in an apartment.
She was living downtown and just basically tent city. Started to befriend some of the people downtown, and I guess someone gave her first blue pill.
And not long after, she ended up here.
My body just gave out on me, and then I started using drugs.
That's when her mother started making the trip from Arizona to Portland just to be with her.
She wasn't like that at all. Growing up, I didn't have any of that to worry about with any of my kids. And Portland sucked the life out of her. It really just ate her up, and I'm just hoping it's not going to spit her out.
Shannon took a leave of absence from her work to help her daughter, but that ends this week.
So I'm hoping I find her today. I've run out of money. I ran out of money weeks ago. So it's just, I just come out here, I try to give her water, I try to convince her to even just get medical care.
Through this, she's come to learn these streets almost as well as those who live on them.
Have you seen Pax? Hi.
I haven't seen Pax.
I helped this one. Oh, this is Ryan.
Yeah. People use drugs to get through it.
But that's one way I try to find her is Is networking.
It's the only thing she can do, since legally she's not allowed to force her daughter into treatment or take her without consent.
So it just seems like there's just roadblock after roadblock, that there's nothing I can do because of her age. And hopefully she lives to see her 29th birthday at the end of this month.
A painful reality she's learning to live with.
I don't want my daughter to die. I'm supposed to die first. She's supposed to go to my funeral.
So she keeps doing the only thing she can.
Staring at bodies on the street. Like, is that mine? Is that person dead? Is that person alive? When I do find her, I'll park and I'll sit there for hours with her.
We visited Southwest 4th and Harvey Milk, a spot she often camps.
Could this be my sweetheart? It could be. Pax, it is her. Sweetheart. What? Oh no, it's not my daughter. Are you okay? You need some water? I thought it was her, but it's not. The same, because she cut her hair. I go like this, and now it's a low. So that it's like this emotional up and down every day.
Every day, hoping to catch her before it's too late.
We're told by other people to turn our backs, to let them hit rock bottom. But this is rock bottom. I don't see how street life is any sort of life at all.
And Blair joins us now. Blair, I mean, you really feel for Shannon. They're talking about rock bottom. She feels like they are there. She did not find her daughter today, but she has found her in the past. When they do find each other, what's that conversation like?
So from what the mother tells me, it really depends on the amount of drugs that Jade has done that day, where she is mentally. Shannon carries supplies with her every day. That's things like water, food, clothes. Sometimes they'll sit together for hours. Other times, Jade will get angry with her mom, angry that she's even out there trying to help her. So it really depends.
What options does Shannon have?
Well, her options are limited, and that's the sad part, unfortunately. Parents like this, they can take this sort of relentless route of going out day after day, trying to find their child and convince them to go into treatment, or they can let them reach that rock bottom on their own and try to wait for the moment they see the light on their own, which both options aren't that great.
Yeah, to say nothing of what happens if the person wants to go into detox or treatment. I remember talking to a mother last year who her daughter was an alcoholic. She was trying to get her into treatment, had to send her out of the state to find treatment as well. So I guess the question is, what happens now? It sounds like Shannon has spent a lot of money. She's got to go back to work. And frankly, that she is absolutely terrified she is not going to see her daughter again. I mean, let's be blunt, that's a reality here.
That fear is very real. She's learned to live with it every day. But like you said, she has to go back to work, at least for this next month. Then she plans to come back here, and she's hoping that that time over this next month will sort of show her daughter what it's like to not have her right in her back pocket, to not know that her mom is out here searching for her. So maybe that'll push her to want to get help on her own, but we'll see what this next month brings.
Yeah, hoping that time away makes something change there, something to break the cycle, right?
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Blair.
Up next on The Story, while the tolls on I-205 are officially on hold, elsewhere it's cash or credit to cross, including in Hood River, the bridge across the Columbia.
This is a beautiful bridge, but it's not functional anymore.
And since we're coming up on a century since it was first built, a new bridge is on the horizon.
The overall cost to complete is about $600 million.
And you can guess what that means. The what, the when, and the how much when it comes to your wallet. When The Story returns.
Earlier this year, Oregon Governor Tina Kotek announced that new tolling efforts in the Portland metro area were being paused until 2026. So that pause there had a little bit of a catch because it does not apply to tolls that are already in place. Now it turns out tolls on at least one bridge are set to actually go up. The Port of Hood River Commission voted last week to raise tolls for vehicles crossing the Hood River Bridge starting in September. We are not talking a hike of a few cents here. For people paying cash, the tolls are going from $2 per car up to $3.50. If you're set up with the automatic payment system, yeah, they are also going up, though from $1 to $1.75. Not quite double, but it almost feels like it there. So why are they going up? For one, the bridge is aging. It's turning 100 next year. So we sent digital reporter and producer Anthony Masuk, who you might say is our big transportation infrastructure expert, to Hood River to help us bridge that gap between the past and the future.
When the Hood River Bridge opened in 1924, it cost 10 cents to cross per person or animal, or 75 cents per animal-drawn vehicle.
The original bridge had a wooden deck, and it had the old Model Ts, and it was a different world back in the 1920s.
The Port of Hood River bought the bridge from its original private owners in 1950 and has maintained it ever since. But despite some upgrades over the years for modern road and river traffic, it's due for replacement.
You can basically only polish a doorknob so many times before the doorknob breaks, and that's really the situation that we're in here.
The bridge is unlikely to survive the big one, and the support columns are spaced uncomfortably close together, so barges on the main Columbia River channel don't have much margin for error as they thread their way through. Width is also a big problem up on the bridge deck, where there are narrow lanes and no shoulders. So cramped that drivers in big vehicles are urged to fold in their mirrors to make sure they don't get sheared off.
We actually have trucks, fruit trucks and lumber trucks, lock up mid-span. That causes huge traffic problems all the way back onto Highway 14 and I-84.
There you go. You want a receipt?
There's no shoulders, there's no turnaround, so we literally have to start pulling cars out backwards until we can get those trucks unhooked.
Even when traffic is moving smoothly, it can feel pretty harrowing to drive across despite the bridge's 15-mile-per-hour speed limit.
You can really feel your car moving on that steel deck, and so that really makes it dicey. And if you're not a real confident driver, there's a lot of people that only drive this bridge once because they just don't feel safe doing it.
The new bridge is a big deal for Hood River, but it might be an even bigger deal on the Washington side for the towns of Bingen and White Salmon. Drivers from those towns are a majority of the traffic on the bridge right now, commuting over to Hood River sometimes multiple times a day. And whenever the current bridge is out of commission, you're looking at an hour-long detour in one direction or the other to find another way across the river. The bridge averages about 4 million crossings each year, more than half of which are Washington traffic. White Salmon Mayor Marla Keithler says the crossing is indispensable for North Shore residents, and a new bridge is a critical step to make sure it stays available.
I mean, this new bridge really is essential to the long-term resiliency of our Washington communities in Western Klickitat. This really is our lifeline.
Keithler is also one of the commissioners on the newly created Hood River White Salmon Bridge Authority, which officially took over management of the project on July 1st and will own and operate the new bridge once it's finished. The Port of Hood River will continue to play a supporting role, but Keithler says the new authority's shared leadership structure means a lot to residents on the Washington side.
It allows bi-state representation, and going forward ensures that all tolls on that new bridge stay only with the bridge for the long-term operation and maintenance of that singular facility. And I think that that's been a key part, especially for Washington residents, is to finally have a seat at the table and make sure there's that representation long-term.
The New Bridge Authority grew out of a working group that was created about 5 years ago, and officials say that marked a turning point in the quest to bring the long-simmering idea of a new crossing into reality.
And the great thing is that we're all on the same team. And so we have support from the Washington side, we have support from the Oregon side, and we're working with the tribes, the Native American tribes, which has been starting to become very successful. So it seems like everyone is all on the same page that this is a beautiful bridge, but it's not functional anymore.
So what will the replacement crossing look like? It's still going through the federal environmental review process, which means the design is not 100% done, but the big pieces are already locked in place. It'll still be a 2-lane bridge, but much wider. 12-foot lanes and 8-foot shoulders instead of those slim 9-foot lanes. It's also going to have a multimodal path on the western side, allowing cyclists and pedestrians to use the crossing for the first time. It'll ditch the steel grating for a more modern concrete deck, and the lift span is also going away. The new bridge will cross the main river channel at 90 feet, high enough to provide clearance for all vessels. The project has secured about $118 million in funding so far, but there's still a lot more that will need to come together in the next couple years before construction can begin.
The overall cost to complete is about $600 million. So the goal is, if we could get a commitment from Oregon and Washington at about $125 million apiece, and then, our commitment is this $15 to $20 million for the local community reserve fund that would help us get a TIFIA or other federal funding that could then push us over that $525 to $600 million and get us to where we need to go.
That $15 to $20 million she mentioned is the additional revenue that will be brought in by raising tolls on the current bridge. If all the other pieces come together, officials hope construction can get underway in late 2025 or early 2026. The new bridge is going to be built just a little bit west of the old one, which means on the Hood River side it's going to land right about where we're standing. And it's going to take about 4 years to build, so if it stays on schedule, that'll mean wrapping up in 2029, and that's the point where traffic will shift over from the old bridge to the new one, and it'll finally be time for Hood River to say goodbye to the old one after a little over a century. The tolls are going to stick around on the new bridge, but port staff say the toll hike coming in September is the only one they think they'll need to make during planning and construction. There could be more down the road once the new bridge is up and running, but we'll have to cross that bridge and pay that toll when we come to it. Anthony Masuk, KGW News.
Yes, we will. All right, 2029 maybe. So why does the bridge still have tolls? After all, they eventually went away on the Astoria and interstate bridges. In fact, some of you may remember there were tokens that were used to cross the bridge between Portland and Vancouver. Marcella sent us this picture a while back after she found this in some of her dad's keepsakes. Thanks for sending that. The big difference is that the other bridges are owned by the Oregon and Washington transportation departments, which can use state gas tax revenue to pay for the maintenance. The Hood River Bridge is owned by the port, which does not have access to the funding. That is also why the Bridge of the Gods, a little bit further west, also has tolls because it is owned by the port of Cascade Locks.
Next at 6:30, we're following breaking news of a wildfire that's causing evacuations in Molalla. Some residents near the Twin Fir mobile home park are being told to leave now. Plus, we'll show you how PGE is using artificial intelligence in the fight to prevent future wildfires in Oregon. And we'll take a look back at the life of one of Oregon's pioneers in the coffee business. Those stories and more coming up at 6:30. We hope to see you then.
Well, that's it for us this evening. Thanks so much for watching. Pat is back with you tomorrow, but stick around. Laurel and I have breaking news on a wildfire that's burning in the Molalla area. We have an update right after this.